Welcome everyone to Midwest Tree ID. On this channel, it is my mission to help you learn an abundance of trees that grow right here in the Midwest, and some key features on how to identify them. There's just one thing to clarify before we begin. We're not going to be throwing hatred or ridiculing any of the species that we're going to be talking about. But we do, however, want to encourage thoughtful conversation in the comments about personal experiences and things like that. Please try to remember that everything has value and that we are here to enjoy nature and everything it has to offer. So without anything else, let's jump right in. Hey guys, thanks for joining me. Welcome back to Midwest Tree ID, and today we are going to be talking about Cercis canadensis. This is the eastern redbud, probably one of the most common native trees planted in our landscapes, especially of the smaller statured trees. And the eastern redbud is going to be most easily identifiable by its very rounded leaves. It's going to be very similar to the Catsura that we kind of looked at before, except sometimes the eastern redbud is going to be a little bit cupped. Sometimes that's typically they can be quite prone to doing this. It's typically a fertilizer problem, but they are quite. It is quite common to have this happen. But the leaves are going to be nice and kind of rounded, coming to a nice little shallow tip point at the tip there. The eastern redbud is definitely, like I said before, one of the most common ornamental native trees planted. Typically it flowers in April, usually fairly early, and it's a pretty solid pollinator tree if it's warm enough for the pollinators to be out while it's in bloom. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the bark, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the habit. So it is pretty common on the eastern redbud to have kind of little shallow flakes, especially in mature specimens. Like this one here is relatively mature, and it's going to have frequently, you're going to see this kind of red on some of these. Like I said, here's some more of that peeling exfoliation that the bark is pretty well known for. But where the bark has not peeled off, you're typically going to see kind of a light, dull gray rather than this real red. But that bark is pretty distinguishable, especially on these more mature specimens. So this redbud here has a lot of undergrowth, but redbud is frequently grown kind of as a multi-stem tree, almost a shrub, a large shrub. They look nice kind of either way, kind of a multi-stem shrub or a large single stem tree. They can be grown both ways. But they're really typically fairly dense, not going to get real big. This is about as big as they get. I've seen them a little bit bigger, but this is typically about mature size here, about 20 feet or so height and about 15 feet wide at the base. So as I stated earlier, eastern redbud is native to pretty much most of the Midwest, including right here in Illinois. It is one that you can find very abundantly here in our native forests in the central Illinois area. Probably pretty commonly found in Ohio and Indiana and Iowa as well. Again, like I said earlier too, it is definitely a very, very popular tree, but it can be quite prone to self-seeding. In fact, this one has self-seeded abundantly in the past, and behind it there's actually a volunteer that we've decided to let grow in, and it's doing pretty well. So redbud is definitely one that can self-seed pretty abundantly in the landscape, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still a very, very nice native tree and a commonly found one in the landscape. So let's go ahead and jump back in time a little bit so I can show you what the tree looks like when it's in flower. All right, so we're looking at the flowers on the eastern redbud, and obviously on most of these there are white flowering cultivars, but the majority of your eastern redbuds are going to be this lavender or violet color. Most of the actual petals are going to be kind of a lighter, more lavender than violet, and the undersides are going to be the darker, more violet color. And these flowers, unlike a lot of others, are going to bloom on old wood and emerge directly off the branches. kind of like you can kind of see here, and they emerge before the tree starts to leaf out. And as you can see here on the end of this branch, and even on the ends of some of these other ones, you're starting to see some leaves starting to emerge. But on the newer growth, on the youngest growth of the tree, you will not see flowers typically too much. Maybe on the occasion, but pretty rare. And so we'll go ahead and take a look at the tree from a distance so you can kind of see what to expect. But this is typically, of course, it's Easter weekend, and so that's about the typical time here in early to mid-April that you can really see Eastern redbuds really blooming. And you see them all over the place. Very common to find in the landscape. Also very common to find in your native woods and along roadsides and areas like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the tree from a distance. So redbuds typically have really sort of shrubby or scrubby looking habit. They're really not overly large. You can see them get to be about 30 feet in height from time to time, but mostly these are going to be low and spreading trees. But they look really nice when they're in bloom like this. Very easy to spot from a distance, and they are definitely one of the earliest trees that our pollinators or honeybees absolutely love. So it's always a great one that you can find at most of your nurseries. Otherwise, thanks for joining me, and we will see you guys next time. Be sure to like and subscribe.